To view how gentrification has reshaped our urban neighborhoods, there is no other community in San Diego that has grown most in downtown other than our identifiable East Village. Everything from new developments, housing markets, and new small businesses have reshaped East Village.
East Village is taking on a new role, and and maybe it's a role that's been talked about, but it's coming to fruition. When Petco Park went in, the whole theme was it takes a village, and they were looking at this as an overflow for the research and development that goes on in North County and Sorrento Mesa. That these uses were located downtown because the people who work in these uses want to be in a more urban environment. And that slowly may be happening, but it's more the creative types.
We wanted to interview a business owner who we've met. Danny is a resident who lives and works at the lofts right above NewSchool. He's been living here and runs his own flower shop business for over 10 years.
We live in 206, and our studio that we work from is in 208. It's right over top of your guys' lab. Yeah, everything that's here wasn't here. This was a parking lot. That was that was our commercial parking for our resident parking, and there was the Pacific Coast Auto Detailers were there, and they got moved out. And this was Fastenal, actually. This was a factory here when we moved in as well, so they cleared that out too. So really, pretty much everything. I mean, pretty much everything around this building that was here when we moved in is gone now and been replaced with condos we can't afford to live in. So. Well, we rented 725 where your guys' Mac lab is now. That was where we lived and worked out of the same exact space when we first, and that would be about 2010. And we had to move out so that NewSchool could have that space, and they moved us up to the second floor. And we moved out to our apartment, moved out to the Mesa, but we found that driving back and forth was too much. So when an apartment opened up here, we moved into it. And we stay here because we can afford the rent. It's a cool building and it's inexpensive.
Well, East Village is unique in some way because it is part of downtown. It is isolated right now from more traditional neighborhoods like Sherman Heights and Bankers Hill. And it's largely, there's a lot of vacant lots. There's a lot of vacant properties. So the benefit is the infill that's happening here. The new development that's going in on lots that are underutilized or vacant. There is displacement, but it's in displacement of commercial as well as residential. But there are different ways of doing it. In a neighborhood like Barrio Logan or City Heights, it's selective infill. You don't wipe out a whole neighborhood, and you don't have a whole neighborhood to play with. You have some blocks that are underutilized for retail, you can take out for something else with, or you have blocks that are really, buildings that are really blighted, that taking those blocks or those buildings out and replacing them with something different. It's much more selective, much more surgical than what we used to do 40, 50 years ago, where they just parked the bulldozer and went into the neighborhood and just go right through and wipe out everything and start over again.
And we don't know what the disposition of this building is. They actually sold it. So that part on this side with the yellow has been sold. The NewSchool actually owns the other portion over there, so they have some kind of a deal. It's not part of the deal. But so we're still kind of waiting to see if they're going to tear it down and rebuild it, or if they're going to just renovate it, or if they're going to just raise our rents for the next couple of years. We really don't know where we're going to be. It's kind of, we would like to stay, partly because it's extremely convenient for us, and partly because it's extremely affordable. And we've been looking around the city for places that we can move our business to that are operable for us, like having a roll-up door and a freight elevator if necessary, having access to water, having close proximity to where we would live, all those things that we enjoy here. And the rent, the cheapest rent we've been able to find is almost $1 more per square foot than what we pay here. So this is supposed to be a super block. They're going to close 14th there and make a park out of it eventually. That's the plan for that. I mean, we love how it looks. We love how nice it's getting. We would like to see less homeless people, less poop on the sidewalk, but at the same time as we can't afford that, like, to live. It looks great, but we wouldn't be able to live here if it's urban.
In the 80s, there was a movie studio in this building, and we were called West Palm Beach, Florida. And it was supposed to, all this stuff going on around here. But if you look at some of those old films that were 20 years old, you look at them and you don't recognize, you're trying to figure out, I know that's there, I know, but I can't remember where that was. And because the area has changed.
East Village has a handful of historic buildings, one of which is Wonder Bread. We're now known as Mission Brewery. Here we met Amy, who is a bartender at Mission.
So Mission Brewery, the original one, was one of the first 3 breweries in San Diego pre-Prohibition, 1913, 2007, the 2 dates that are up there. And then it was revitalized by our owner, Dan Sellis, in 2007 when he won at Great American Beer Festival. He took home the bronze medal for homebrewing and revived the name Mission Brewery that had fizzled out post-Prohibition. And then thus Mission was reborn. So I believe they've been in this location since about 2010, 2011. East Village is a lot of awesome space for upcoming businesses and to make a brewery, especially when you're planning on producing a lot of beer, you need a space that's going to be sizable. And I think East Village was just the most easy solution to that. We've got lots and lots of stuff happening inside of here. All of our production happens out of this one building here in East Village. This is the old Wonder Bread building from 1894. So it's pretty cool to be able to occupy a building just as historical as the Mission name. I think it's definitely a spot for people to come in after work. Lots of people kind of waiting out the traffic, come in and socialize. It's real nice. We've got lots of people that have just moved into some of the new developments that have just been built that come over just as a local spot to kind of get to know the neighborhood a lot better.
All sorts of criteria. The California redevelopment law used to have, before they did away with redevelopment, had criteria that this is how you determine whether an area is blighted or underutilized. And you go through and you look at vacancies, you look at conditions of buildings, you look at abandonments, you look at social problems, and you sort of analyze all that and decide that this is an area that you're going to focus on. And it's just still the same way. It's just city planners still do that and look at neighborhoods. We would talk about triaging, which is a military term, usually for industry accidents and when somebody's, you look at a neighborhood, is it fine? Is it just it's going uphill and you just don't want to do anything? Is it one that just needs some tweaking, but leave it alone? Or is it one that really needs a lot of attention? And you go through and you look at neighborhoods and you decide, or pieces of neighborhoods, and decide what you're going to focus on, and that's where you spend your resources. The library moving down here was a way of adding a use that would bring people in that help reinforce and strengthen the neighborhood. But it takes time.
East Village is an excellent example to illustrate the changes evoked by gentrification. As a highlight of this process, we picture the example of new luxury residential buildings such as Pinnacle in the Park, 13th and Market, and 4 and 15. These buildings also have retail spaces that are bringing new small businesses such as coffee shops, restaurants, and many more commercial zones. Because of these new and popular residential buildings, there is now a new demographic change in East Village.
So obviously they did see potential to develop here. The market's a bit saturated at this point with our market of high-end studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. So it's a bit saturated now. I don't know if we see potential to continue to build just because of the saturated market with so much inventory, but yes. And obviously Pinnacle, they started the original project like 7 years ago. They had some major setbacks early on, but they obviously saw potential in East Village as well. Pinnacle, obviously, as you know, they've just broken ground on their second tower, should be about the same size, about 500 apartments. So obviously, if they're embarking on something like that, they're going to spend $80 million. They definitely see potential, or it's just they've already gotten the financing, so they have to do it now. Does it have a positive influence in East Village? I'd say yes. I would say for real estate values, yes. I would say as far as 4 years ago, there was a major housing shortage in East Village. There was one property, and that was pretty much 13th and Market. This wasn't even built until 3 years ago. So really, there's a lot of people who didn't have a place to live, which inflated prices elsewhere around the city. So yes, I think that Pinnacle entering the market and hitting it with whatever, almost 500 apartments, has had a positive influence in the real estate market. So the project kind of evolved. It was originally set to be condos. After the market crash, they started the project before 2007. A little before 2007, yeah. So that was just before the market crash. They'd already acquired the land and gotten the financing. So market crashed, and they realized they were not going to be able to sell condos in East Village for the price per square foot they originally intended. So now they changed their strategy to let's have rentals instead. We'll have continuous cash flow, because they knew they weren't going to be able to sell they would have to sell them for millions of dollars each to really get their money back. So instead of selling them, they started renting them. As far as the affordable housing or below market rate units, BMRs you might hear me refer to them as, they've got 36 of them, if I'm not mistaken, all priced at about a little bit under 50% of what the market rate would be for those units. And yeah, there's a 150 person waiting list right now for those. I would say they kind of clash. I mean, anyone who's been down that area knows that a luxury high rise on whatever that is, 13th and Island, is obviously going to clash with the surrounding area. There's a large homeless population. That park, Fault Line Park, at first it became almost like a safe haven for transients and extremely low income people, it's called. So I would say it didn't integrate right off the bat. The goal is that build the tower and eventually the neighborhood will change around it, almost forced gentrification. But they have done, with the affordable housing that they have, so they have tried to help the community. However, that affordable housing is, I think you asked me in one of the earlier questions, it is imposed by the city. It's a requirement for, I think, all new developments over a certain unit count.
I see.
It's difficult, on one hand, UDR especially is a very charitable company. I think the week after next, we're all going and going to the food bank to help out the homeless. But then these are the same people that are outside our building defecating on our signs. So it's kind of it's tough. It's like on one hand you want to be really charitable, on the other hand you don't want to encourage the homeless population. So we kind of look at them as part of the community at this point, and it's just they're there.
And
I would say it's really split. It's either high middle to upper class young professionals between the ages of 27 and 40, or it's very low income people and or transients. You've got the Alpha Project across the street, as well as, I forget what it's called, but whatever's above the 7-Eleven is also very low income housing. So it's kind of like you have those two ends of the spectrum. Not a whole lot of families, a lot more single people or couples in apartments. I think because, that's a good question, why are there no middle class families in East Village? I still don't think it appeals to them. I think if you go outside the city, you get a lot more square footage per your dollar. So if you've got 2 kids at home, you don't want to be in a 1-bedroom apartment here. You'd rather get a house out in Mira Mesa that's the same price.
exactly.
But obviously a single guy who can afford a $2,500 a month apartment is probably in a higher income threshold than a couple who wants a $1,800 house. Sure.
Since you've been working
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I started at Forum 15 when it was first conceived or first built. And since then, yeah, the neighborhood's definitely just got a gourmet ramen noodle place up the street. We've got a Cafe Primo right here. I mean, definitely seen some gentrification in the neighborhood. Also, recently there's been a lot more homeless people, probably in the last year. There's been an influx of homeless as well. So it's kind of like, yes, it's been gentrified, but yes, there's also more transients now.
But the homeless problem has waxed and waned over the years, and we haven't really addressed the problem as we should.
It's kind of screwed up because small business don't get a chance to move up, to get ahead like that, you know what I mean? You got to start small to grow. I was in the military, and I came to San Diego. I got swept off my feet by the Marines, so I'm a jarhead now, you know, for life. We all have a right. Yeah. This is my country. I pay taxes. I can prove it. I got my papers to prove that I'm a voter. I know. You have to have an address. I always have an address when you come to vote. I voted for you. You know, I didn't vote for Hitler, but I should have. I live in the streets. The reason why I say the streets, because I stay in hotels. And when you stay in a hotel, you're listed as homeless. There's another word they use though. And so I'm in the streets because one, as a solo, lonely. They don't have no family here. My family spread it out, and I hopefully I'll be able to go back to Cuba now. That we Cuba Libre, you know what I mean? Cuba Libre is, you know, part of the United States now, coming in January or whatever. But now we got to deal with this Trump ass person, you know. And I believe that Trump, he's the beginning of the entire crisis, waiting to give full birth. And now they thought black people. No, I won't even say black. I would say the best word to use is people of color. People of color are the ones that he's targeting. And you go to messing with Mexicans, you definitely don't want to mess with the black community. And he's doing that because he's attacking the Muslims, which are black, which are white, which are Hispanics. You better be careful, man. You open up a can of worms that you ain't gonna be able to finish the eating. I eat all more. But all my money go there. They don't. The shelters unless you under somebody else's regime. So don't tell me about Fidel Castro regime. We do the same thing here. We just smarter about it. Okay, Fidel Castro did a lot to help his people. He did more than they had ever probably recognized. Some do, some don't.
Really, talking about this is the final phase of downtown revitalization, and everybody's perception of this area is different, and that came out in the whole discussions about the stadium downtown. And people looked at this and said, this area is worthless, and the stadium would solve everybody's problems. To others who saw this as a neighborhood, or others who saw this as a place where we're just going to shovel all the homeless and just say, that's it. So there's that. And then the other one is San Diego's burgeoning new tech hub poised to reshape downtown. It talks about what's happening down there and what could happen. And little things. I mean, it's just the fact that the courtyard went in, which was some of your predecessors who did that, and now it's going to move because
there's a new high-rise.
And the high-rise might include University of California. So it's things change. See, this is a changing area that has a lot of potential, which means that in 5 or 10 years, you won't recognize it. Yeah. And it's just, I'm rambling, but this has been the set of the area for lots of
Gentrification isn't always negative. New projects like Courtyard and Meshuggah Shack vitalize once empty urban spaces that create a new community fabric. We hope you've enjoyed our film.